In 1936, Dmitri Shostakovich was the most celebrated young composer in the Soviet Union. Then one unsigned editorial in Pravda turned him from national treasure into a man sleeping with a packed suitcase by his door, waiting for the secret police. To understand what that kind of pressure does to genius, you have to go back to the very beginning. In 1926, a 19-year-old from Leningrad stepped onto the world stage, and classical music would never sound the same again. Dmitri Shostakovich, thin and sharp-eyed, had just finished his first symphony as a graduation assignment for the Petrograd Conservatory. The city was still raw from revolution. There was hunger, cold, and the future felt uncertain. Yet, inside those battered walls, Shostakovich wrote with a kind of fearless clarity, channeling chaos into order, modern rhythms into something unmistakably personal. The premiere stunned even hardened critics. In the packed hall, the music leapt and twisted, now playful, now biting, with a nervous energy that seemed to echo the city's own pulse. It wasn't just Russian ears that caught fire. Western conductors Arturo Toscanini, Leopold Stokowski, and Otto Klemperer rushed to champion the symphony. Within a year, orchestras in Berlin, Philadelphia, and London were performing it. This was the first Soviet symphony to break through the Iron Curtain of the West's skepticism, a signal that something new and dangerous was brewing in Soviet music. Shostakovich's early voice drew on Beethoven's defiance and Stravinsky's wild inventions, but there was also something more anxious, more jagged. In conservatory classrooms, he debated the latest modernist ideas, absorbing jazz, Mahler, and Russian folk tunes, all of it fused into music that was restless, unpredictable, and utterly his own. For a brief moment, it seemed like nothing could stop him. The world was listening, and the future belonged to this bold young composer. But in the Soviet Union, even genius had a price, and the higher you rose, the further you had to fall. January 28, 1936. Pravda, the official voice of the Soviet Communist Party, runs a headline that chills the entire Soviet music world: muddle instead of music. The article is unsigned, but no one doubts its authority. It singles out Shostakovich's opera Lady Macbeth of the Mtsensk district, a work that had, until now, been praised as a triumph of Soviet creativity. Suddenly, what was celebrated as bold and modern is condemned as dangerous, even subversive. The article calls his music chaotic, neurotic, and coarse. It warns that such sounds could poison the minds of the Soviet public, suggesting that what captivated Western audiences was precisely what made it suspect at home. The timing is no accident. 2 days earlier, Stalin himself attended a performance at the Bolshoi Theatre. Rumors swirl that he left early, grim-faced. In the Soviet Union, a leader's frown can destroy a career. Within days, theatres cancel scheduled performances. The opera vanishes from the stage. Composers, conductors, and critics whisper about who might be next. For Shostakovich, the message is unmistakable. Overnight, he has become a target. He reads the editorial while on tour in Arkhangelsk. Friends urge him to keep a suitcase packed and ready for arrest. At night, he lies awake, listening for footsteps in the hall. The phone rings and he freezes. The sense of danger is not just professional, it is personal, existential. In Stalin's Russia, art is never just about art. The party press has spoken, and from this moment, every note he writes could be the difference between survival and oblivion. In 1937, Shostakovich stood at a crossroads. His Fourth Symphony sat locked away, too risky to perform. The shadow of Pravda's attack loomed over every note he wrote. Then, with Symphony No. 5, he offered what looked like surrender, a work he subtitled A Soviet Artist's Practical Response to Just Criticism. The phrase became famous, but the music told a more complicated story. The Fifth's premiere in Leningrad drew a packed house. The audience, many of them survivors of the purges, listened in charged silence. On the surface, the symphony gave officials what they demanded: clear melodies, grand gestures, a finale that blazed with triumph. The ovation lasted over half an hour, but beneath the surface, something else churned. Shostakovich's finale, so often played at a breakneck pace, was marked in the score to be performed slowly, almost painfully so. The fanfares feel forced, the victory hollow, as if the music itself is straining under the weight of expectation. For those who listened closely, despair echoed beneath the celebration. The fifth became a masterclass in doublespeak, a template for survival under watchful eyes, where every phrase carried two meanings, one for the censors and another for those who heard the fear behind the noise. August 9th, 1942. Inside the starving, battered city of Leningrad, an orchestra gathers in Philharmonia Hall. There is no safety here, just the sound of distant shell fire and the ache of hunger. Most of the musicians are survivors, some so weak they can barely hold their instruments. Conductor Karl Eliasberg has scraped together a full ensemble by pulling players from military units, hospitals, and even factories. Extra rations are handed out, not as reward, but as lifelines, to keep them upright through the rehearsals. Each note comes at a cost. Each rehearsal is a small act of defiance against despair. The city is still under siege. Loudspeakers are wired across streets, hospitals, even trenches. When the first bars of Shostakovich's Seventh Symphony ring out, the music cuts through the silence. Artillery opens fire, not in battle, but to silence the German guns long enough for the symphony to be heard. The performance is broadcast live, relayed by radio across the city, then sent by shortwave to Moscow, London, New York. Soviet authorities turned the event into a symbol of resistance, a weapon of morale. For 1 hour, civilians and soldiers listened together, some weeping, some simply enduring. Shostakovich's music is transformed, commandeered by the state, carrying both hope and warning. In this moment, art is not just expression, it is survival, and it is propaganda. February 10th, 1948. The Soviet Central Committee issues a new decree, this time with Andrei Zhdanov's name attached. The words are blunt. Shostakovich, Prokofiev, Khachaturian accused of formalist perversions, of writing music that is alien to the Soviet people. The resolution is read aloud in composers' meetings as if it were a criminal indictment. Dozens of works are banned overnight. Shostakovich is stripped of teaching posts, his music blacklisted from concert halls. The message is clear: step out of line and your life's work can vanish in a day. Yet even as the pressure mounts, the music refuses to die. In 1953, just months after Stalin's death, Shostakovich completes his 10th Symphony. It is vast, brooding, haunted by shadows. Some hear it as a portrait of Stalin himself, others as a private act of mourning or defiance. The symphony's premiere in December draws nervous applause, but the meaning remains ambiguous. Was this a coded protest or a survivor's lament? Decades later, a new controversy erupts. In 1979, Solomon Volkov publishes the book Testimony, claiming it is Shostakovich's secret memoir, dictated under threat. The book paints the composer as a hidden dissident, a master of coded resistance. But scholars and family members challenge its authenticity, arguing over signatures, memories, and motives. The truth remains tangled. Was Shostakovich the regime's loyal artist, or its quietest critic? The debate still divides historians, each side searching for certainty in a life lived under surveillance. In July 1960, Shostakovich walked the ruined streets of Dresden, a city still haunted by fire and silence. Alone in a foreign land, he began writing his 8th string quartet, a work he would later call his own Requiem. Hidden within the notes, he inscribed the 4 pitches that spelled his name in German: D, E flat, C, B, D-S-C-H. It's a signature, but also a confession, woven into nearly every movement. The quartet opens with these notes, circling back to them like a memory that refuses to fade. Some hear it as a cry of despair, others as a coded message: his life, his fear, his defiance, all compressed into 4 letters. The score's dedication reads simply to the victims of fascism and war, but the music feels more personal, as if Shostakovich is writing directly to himself, locking his true voice inside the music where only the careful listener can find it. Today, Shostakovich's music moves through the world in ways he could never have imagined. Streaming platforms like Spotify and Apple Music push his symphonies and quartets to millions. Symphony No. 5 alone has passed 100 million streams, and his name appears on playlists from Berlin to Beijing. For many, their first encounter with Shostakovich comes through the background of a movie or a game where echoes of his tension and restraint color scenes of conflict and survival. Algorithms recommend his works next to film scores and experimental pop, blurring the line between classical music documentary and the playlists shaping the global music industry. Modern composers such as Hans Zimmer, Hildur Gudnadottir, and John Williams cite his influence, borrowing his techniques to heighten drama or hint at hidden meaning. The code he once used to hide his voice now circulates freely, woven into soundtracks, remixes, and the digital pulse of today's listening. Shostakovich's legacy isn't just preserved, it's alive, threaded through the algorithms and creative choices of a new generation. In an era when silence was safest, his symphonies spoke in code, carrying echoes of defiance beneath every note. Today, artists still face censors, both visible and unseen. Shostakovich's legacy reminds us true expression survives pressure. He didn't just compose music, he endured it. And in that struggle, he created something unforgettable.